Chapter 7. Reason for Treason. It is never easy to accept terms with an enemy, much less so when it's on the grounds for peace. No matter how much one may say to the other, there's still the remaining embers of hate and disdain, and it's mainly from those small, unnoticed, uneventful sparks can the most disastrous fires sprout from. Wars do not end when the fighting stops. The combat evolves to treaties, agreements, conventions, sanctions, and reparations. But time will, eventually, as it always does, slip on by, and the wounds that were inflicted will soon heal in the generations to come. But they will always be there, hoping to never again open. Commander Decimus now must live with that reality, assigning himself to the judgment of both his superiors and his protectorate. The Aryan Empire and all its citizens, soldiers and nobles, will all take a moment to voice their approval or ire to him. One fact all will ignore when passing judgment. If the roles were reversed, what choice would they have made? Here, in the secluded conference room on board the Pyrric Negotiation, would the many voices have their chance. Decimus had already made an opening statement to the secrecy of this very meeting, that once they had left the room, everything said, felt, and thought of would be left there, for heavy compromises would have to be made, some potentially treasonous.
This is outrageous. This is conceding defeat to someone we could vanquish.
A voice shouted from the far end of the table opposite to Decimus. It was the Decimus ambassador, who had taken the position after the loss of Lord Targos to Tiberius.
Two of my lords are corpses, and the other may as well be, and after all that you expect me to lick my wounds and make deals with their killer? Bollocks to you, and all the vacuum-headed bastards in this room!
If one thing Decimus had to learn quickly when he became a ship commander years ago, is that Decimus are always looking for a fight. And why wouldn't they? Standing on average 10 feet tall, heavily scaled on top of a thick hide that at the right angles have been known to deflect bullets, the upper body strength and muscle mass to wrestle with animals twice their size, and frightening speed on top of that, due to their theropod legs. It becomes obvious why they are one of the very few races in the Aryan Empire that never needed to have augmentations for war. This knowledge passes on their culture as well. They shout a lot and are typically governed by the most focused, brutally cunning, and above all else, the strongest of their peoples. There's no such thing as a weak Decimus, because they're all dead. Decimus responded with equal ferocity, sprouting from his chair and staring right into the eyes of the ambassador. You will do as I both command and give the directive of our operations. Loyalists do not seek fights that can be both avoided and unnecessary, or we face losses that could always be avoided. Current events as evidence. You will have to accept that, Ambassador Garrick. Garrick slammed his fist onto the metal table, shaking it, which caused some objects to rattle off the edges.
We do not run from a fight!
Even if it's suicidal, chipped in Marloch.
Cowards fear death, but they'll die 1,000 times. No, we face it head on and conquer it.
Marloch chuckled. Good luck with Tiberius on yourself, then. The insult didn't brush well with Garrick, who placed right in front of Marloch's face, close enough that the steaming breath from his mouth condensed onto the Black Ops soldier's skin. The onlookers all were on guard, though none touched their weapons, except Decimus, who loaded and cocked his pistol. Safety's off, Garrick. I prefer you sat back down and hear what we have to say." Defiantly, the ambassador turned straight back to him and walked back to where he was originally, sat at the table, never averting his gaze or even blinking, before issuing a proposal of his own. "Make me sit." Decimus removed the magazine from his pistol, cleared the chamber by pulling back on the charging handle to eject the round that was in, and flicking the safety on. Then threw the pistol right towards Garrick. The ambassador rebounded the pistol away from him and leapt onto the table, and snarled with the gut-wrenching curdle of a death rattle, with all the membranes on his neck vibrating and turning red, with pumping blood visibly coursing along its stripes. A natural intimidation tactic and aggression. Commander Decimus had jumped right back onto the table. Despite his injuries, he was compelled to accept the challenge, because his authority was officially being challenged. Marloch's expression was one of both gleeful anticipation and concern. He knew through sparring with Denasia is like fighting a toddler twice your size. It doesn't know just how much tougher it is over you, and will still throw you around like a toy. But just like a toddler, they're ever rarely refined in their movements. Garrick made the first move, aiming for a tackle. Reading the movements, Decimus made a knee strike to the face. It hit, but the sheer weight and momentum of his opponent shunted him upwards. He didn't fall. That would be disastrous. Decimus elbowed him in the back of the neck multiple times to escape. Eventually, Garrick did lose his grip and dashed backwards. Both stood eye to eye, waiting for another move. Some spectators were throwing insults and others praise to both parties. Decimus knew he had a crew to command, and that authority was being tested by none other than the most combative soldier of the ship. Medals, ribbons, and even a large skull on a shoulder pad was proof of Garrick's deeds. This is not a marathon. This had to be ended quickly. Decimus baited an assault, taking a defensive stance. Naturally, the Denasia ambassador responded with what they do best: frontal assault. Coming at him, horns pointed like a charging bull, only to be blindsided by the unfolded wings Decimus had rested on his armour until then. They stretched out fully and flicked away at both sides of Garrick. The pointed stubs were like hammers to his head, beginning to make him dizzy. Until he let out a roar, and from there onwards pain was an illusion. He shrugged off every blow Decimus threw at him, although his accuracy with landing hits were diminished, and the commander took full advantage, targeting the joints of Garrick, slowly bringing him down to a knee, grabbing onto his horns, then proceeding to knee him in the face once again, with enough force this time that the almost 800-pound soldier flew 10 feet and slides off the end of the command table. "Now, I implore you to sit down, Garrick. Don't make me use my other tricks," threatened Decimus. Out of thin air, a ring of energy appeared to his left. Looking inside it shone a close-up of Garrick's head from the side, to which there was another identical ring hovering there too. It was a portal. Decimus pointed the gun, that he loaded again, towards the portal, but made sure it was small enough to stop a hand reaching through it, but large enough for a bullet to pass through, and kept the barrel away from its opening. A few tense seconds gave pause to everyone in the room. It was a standoff. Realizing the situation, Garrick let out a steam from his nostrils before slowly standing. "Fine. Commander, you win. Now enlighten us on what we're about to do. I will magically have everyone in this room agreeing to the terms." Spoken with a hint of venom and salt from the loss to the commander, who recently was hurled around by a much stronger foe not too long ago, adding even more to the humiliation. Decimus placed his weapons back into their holsters and dusted off some papers that got stuck onto his armour, looking around to see if there were any further objections. "Good. Jarl, please pull up a projection of the Dionysus system." Mention of the system brought everyone's curiosity up, even Garrick's. Most leaned forward, as if watching a very tense movie and waiting for the story's climax. The hologram showed a system of 2 stars of equal size, 12 planets, and multiple moons for each. Zooming in on the 7 planets from the system's centre, atmospheric readings, among other data, began to occupy the space around. "We're going on a short leave," yells the commander, which brought on an applause from everyone. "What's the catch, sir? I've never been to that planet before," asked Ensign Dagmafor. "Well, cadet, this planet right here is Benisva. Is one of many, let's say, holiday worlds. And as for the catch, I'm going to recruit a client that'll help us convince that Tiberius has been dealt with." The people present talked amongst themselves until Marloch started to chuckle, then turned into outright laughter, slapping his knee and almost crying. "That's fucking genius, sir. You've got some serious balls." Jarl, to his side, flicked his datapad that brings up the appearance of a single man, the sight of which had most of the women blushing. Even Calla closed her legs a little and uttering to herself that she had a husband back home. "As you can see, I'm going to recruit him to help me reinforce the cover-up. The Orion Empire's top-paid mercenary, whose power is above almost every member of the higher echelons and the Orion Council, and to smaller circles, also known as the alpha male of the galaxy, Garuda." Even Garrick joined in on some laughter with Marloch. Jarl once again raised his hand. "A moment of silence, please." It silenced the pair immediately. Jarl did not flex his rank much, which made it more respected when it was implored. "Garuda, as most of you know, is considered a loose cannon by the higher echelons, but he gets results. He has not failed a contract, never lost a battle apart from a duel between him and the Emperor during his recruitment. He's easygoing, it should make him easier to bribe." Calla raised her hand. Jarl allowed her to speak and used his datapad to amplify her voice to be heard around the room via an intercom. "One issue. He's always thirsty for battle, even more than he thirsts for women. Even the slightest hint of Tiberius actually being alive will have him want us to mail him right back to the planet we just left. Do you have anything that could pass as concrete evidence for a confirmed kill?" Jarl and Decimus looked at each other, then looked around. Jarl spoke in a tone so serious it took the room back a few paces. "As mentioned, whatever is heard or seen in this room remains in it. Understood? Failure to do this can have fatal consequences for all of us." All nodded. "Some of you already know this. Now the rest will." And he turned his attention to Decimus, who looked around the room before placing a hand on each side of his face in a grip. The commander made a slight jolt of the hands, which caused a hiss of depressurized air to sprout from the middle of his head in a straight line and from his ears. Electrical circuits ticked as his face slowly began to pull apart, but his quills remained in place. And when all the air cleared, and what was both sides of his face fully separated and placed on the table in front of him, what was revealed had the entire room bar a few shook. No one could contemplate what was happening, much less what to do about it. What was Decimus's real face was not that of Commander Decimus. Bearing sapphire eyes centered with a snow-white pupil, a distinct scar, and a burn on his right cheek from an explosion. Slight wrinkles suggested he's in his 50s. He reached inside a small pocket in the mask, which had a set of tags that he pulled out. Inscribed on them was Fleet Admiral Alejandro Vasquez of the 35th Aurelian Starfleet. Indeed, your ship commander was a former fleet admiral of the Diagen Federation. I would not object to any anger towards me. Shout them to me after we've concluded this meeting. But it will remain in here. Vasquez then pulled from his pocket a trinket and held it up for everyone to see. This here is a royal seal, given only by Tiberius and members of the Diagen Federation's royal family. Tiberius had some on him, and while I was being thrown around, I managed to snag one from a tear caused by his previous battle with our Gerahine lords. This will be proof enough, combined with my injuries and the subsequent casualties suffered adding to that. And as for convincing Garuda, have faith after all. I have indeed deceived you all for years. But no, I had been given this role, and amnesty is part of my deal to the higher echelons. Why else do you think this one ship is known as the Pyrric Negotiation, when every other ship you can think of have some glorious title attributed to it? It all started to make sense, because it's both a reminder and insult to me losing the Diagen wars against the Empire I now serve allegiance to. Jarl chipped in. I knew from the start, as did some others whose names I won't mention. Indeed, I was assigned specifically to keep an eye on him, though he has indeed served the Empire loyally. Marloch spoke. He took the brunt of Tiberius when we first encountered him, so we could get away in the first place. And let's not ignore the most prominent support to his loyalty, being his hesitation to send people out to engage him when we were given the option, and now this. Were we aimed to avoid a conflict that could cost loss of life, ours would probably be included in this. For a Black Ops commando, you sure like to share your opinions, interjected Biako, his tone condescending. Being in the grey area of malls is part of the job, sir. This has plenty of shades right now. Vasquez sat back into his chair, fidgeting on the trinket and never taking his eyes off it. This indeed will be a test of loyalty to all of us, what we're about to do. Already this could be grounds for treason, based on the fact we're conspiring to lie to our leaders. But sleep knowing the boogeyman Tiberius was to you, people, is not coming back, thanks to what we're about to do. Right now, we're at full speed to Benizva, and then we'll be heading straight back to the outskirts of the Trapia system, waiting for Eidolon's arrival, if we get there in time. Garrick strode towards Vasquez, and with concern and disgust in his tone asked, And what if he's there before us? Do we smile at the firing squad? Without hesitation, Vasquez turned his face and confidently spoke. Then Garuda will also be used as justification of us leaving the system. After all, we have lost 2 Gerahine lords and concluded that our forces were inadequate to face Tiberius, without suffering catastrophic casualties, without a certainty of victory. So we went to get the most battle-hungry and powerful mercenary we could find, and promised him the fight of his life. Garrick smiled. That's actually brilliant. No wonder he was a menace to our efforts in the last months of the war. Vasquez punched Garrick right in the gut, which caused him to falter and lay in the fetal position on the ground, groaning in pain. I would respectfully request you do not bring up my past service to the Federation. Despite my service to this empire, that does not mean those comrades I lost back then magically have been forgotten. But alas, I do have a backup plan. Any questions? One of the Teesh operatives asks who agreed to allow Decimus to be part of the Empire, to which he responded, That's classified. Enough for me to even tell you that. but there was multiple who did sign for my transference. The fleet I was charged to evacuate made it out, but the room waited for the closing statement. The terms I agreed to were complicated. Biako asked his own question. What's stopping us from killing you out of spite? It was a question that probably should not have been asked, but out loud, everyone secretly had it in their mind. Vasquez placed back on his mask that perfectly concealed all the features of his Aurelian self and responded with, Test that assumption at your own convenience. But you are all aware of what Alejandro Vasquez was able to do to your top ship captains of that war. If you think yourself their betters, at least have the same bravery to face me head on. Now then, this meeting is adjourned, and has not officially happened. Do we all agree? They all gave a salute and left in an organised manner, each taking their turn to share a glance at Decimus's mask, knowing what it concealed underneath. Almost everyone left. Only Calla, Biako, Jarl and Marloch stayed behind, though Garrick was stopped by Decimus's arm being outstretched in front of his path and gave a stern look wanting a reason for this obstruction. I want to make sure you're in with this. I know your people do not take lying very well. You seem to always know the customs of everyone's race you come across. Am I supposed to be impressed? It's fitting that I was brought up to do my research. That's what I believe separated my Aurelian self from the rest of my Federation's constituents. But I must ask again, are you with us on this? You know I have to anyway. You beat me fair and square with your prowess, and so you have authority over me. By your customs, yes, but not mine. Can I trust you? Despite knowing what we're doing goes against your typical set of morals. Some sacrifices themselves are a test of strength and character. Garrick sighed. You have it. What's your orders? Simple. Jarl will be heading surveillance teams, but he needs boots on the ground. You're gonna be the enforcer of this secrecy. You are, after all, in your third evolutionary stage. Not even Calla would have an easy time against you, or Marloch for that matter. So you are my new bodyguard and advisor alongside him. First order of business. Drinks are on me when we arrive. With a pat on the arm, Garrick follows out the rest towards the ship's bridge. 12 hours later, the great flagship of the Faithful, the flagship known as the Pasture of Serenity, arrives in the next star system from Trappist-1. Aboard the bridge sat Eidolon on an ornate throne twice as high as he was. Similar in layout to Decimus's bridge, but far more regal and larger, though staffed by merely a dozen. Great Illuminator, our scouts do not detect the Pyrric Negotiation in the sector. Eidolon slammed his fist into the armrest. Apart from denting it, the flagship itself jolted downwards too, causing some crew to lose their footings. Apologies. Carry on. Do you have any idea where they may have gone? Detecting the residue of a warp bubble outside the outermost planet. Typical procedure to a exit system, so no suspicious activity there. Their direction might be. Can you triangulate? Didn't take long. Not at all. Seconds, and it was calculated by the cartographer. Benistva! Eidolon snarled. Instead of immediately reporting their apparent success, they've broken even their own protocol to go party it out, which means... No, they couldn't have done it. You think they took Tiberius down?
We will find out. Head to the suspected crash site of the planet and search for any evidence of nearby engagements.
An hour later, the forces had arrived at the area of the crash site. Eidolon marched around observing the wreckage as vehicles patrolled the plains, and search parties wandered the abandoned wrecked village in the distance. Sadouche, his bannerman, was at his side. He picked up a trinket that was surrounded by the signs of combat, from bent metal, fresh craters in the ground, and dried blood. "Sire, this may interest you." He handed it to his master. He watched it closely as dirt was rubbed from it, showing the engraved medal of Fleet Admiral Alejandro Vasquez.
Well now, burying your past along with your former king, I see.
Eidolon began to chuckle, before laughing so loud the clouds above parted, and Sadouche gripped his ears tightly. When he regained his hearing, the apprentice beckoned for a reason. "So, it is done?"
Despite leaving behind some memento, perhaps as a way to leave his past behind along with his presumed dead king, I still don't believe it. He and his crew taking him down, especially since we've seen remains of guerrilla lords littered around that scorched part of the woods. No, they're up to something.
Treason?
No, they'd be stupid if they think they could fool me. They were heading to that party planet, weren't they? As if giving them shore leave would be a suitable cover-up for a victorious celebration. Why not simply broadcast far and wide that Tiberius had been felled? All the glory, all the money, and the women he could have as well for the rest of his crew. No, there's ulterior motives here. Sadouche, open a channel to my ship.
The apprentice linked his communicator to the flagships. Grand Apostle Bartholomew reporting. What is your command, my holiness?
Bartholomew, what is your knowledge on that planet? Bizephyr or something?
Benisva. It's a holiday destination for the loyalists. Very few do we take leisure there, though I have nothing much in terms of military, unless you count the drunken ravers.
Sounds amusing for non-believers. Though is there anyone that would be considered important there right now, at this very moment?
Bartholomew used a neural link to search the Frontier Archives, a galaxy-spanning source of information where all forms of information, social media, and services could be accessed, used by both civilian and military alike. No exclusive bandwidths, and frequencies for the faithful and military are separate in their jurisdictions. On his monitor, flashing like 1,000 bolts of lightning with filters, rendering, and connecting to different servers, could only be observed if he was to slow time down to a crawl. But for Bartholomew, his processing power was implanted right into his brain when he became one of the 12 Grand Apostles of Eidolon, and second in command to his flagship. Well, they're courageously foolish if they're doing what I'm predicting based on what I've got.
Which is?
It would appear that other higher echelon, such as yourself, tends to visit often for the same reasons as most visitors. Garuda, sir. The name left a bitter taste in Eidolon's mouth, enough to make him grit his teeth and spit.
I hate that prick. That man-whore of a rebel parades around like he owns every place he walks into. Begrudgingly, I was ordered by our Emperor, blessed above all, to tolerate his transgressions, because he gets results.
This disapproval became contagious. Even Sadouche took a moment to tab. I've only seen him once, and that was one too many. The fact that women would spread their legs so easily for him is atrocious, but alas, you're right about him in doing a service for our forces.
Precisely why they're going there. It's obvious now. They're going to recruit him. Which means Tiberius is still alive!
Which means, my lord, we will get our divine chance to prove ourselves the gods of this galaxy.
Not just the galaxy, Sadouche. The universe. Bartholomew, deploy Gressel to my location.
After the command was ushered, artificial wind brushed away all the grass of the plains. Even the wreckage began to bend and all the trees uprooted. The vehicles patrolling the plains drew as fast as they could in opposition to the source of the wind. At the precipice, blades of light and scrolls arced in a vortex and began to amass on the ground. The scrolls, folded and joined together by the blades of light, began to create the form of a stocky, muscular frame of a giant beast that stood on its knuckles like a simian beast. When the sculpture was complete, the radiant light erupted, revealing underneath a gargantuous beast, no smaller than 150 feet tall, stood at the ready in front of Eidolon and Sadouche, who took shelter behind his master, as not to be blown away by the winds.
Magnificent as always, aren't you, Gressel?
Eidolon complimented, as the beast calmly approached the pair and placed its head within arm's reach, where Eidolon placed the palm of his right hand upon its snout and uttered,
Your master, until I return, is Grand Apostle Bartholomew. Only to him do you answer.
The creature made a noise to communicate its understanding. Thank you for taking the control of the beast to me, my lord. But for what purpose?
I'll leave behind a garrison, just to keep watch. The fleet can stay here, but my ship is the fastest of them all. I need to make haste to the system Decimus is heading.
For what purpose, sire?
Answers. Perhaps even a confession.
And with that concludes Chapter 7. Stay tuned soon for we delve into just who this strongest man of the galaxy is, this Garuda. Thank you for listening.